Good afternoon. Welcome to the press conference for the opening film of the 74th Berlinale.
I don't know if I'm qualified enough to answer the question about, speak for the nation, really. But I do think that it was a collective trauma, particularly for people of a certain age. And I think that we're still processing that. And I also think that art can be a really useful balm for that wound. And I think the book certainly was, and it was a huge seller in Ireland. It seemed like everybody read it. And I think, the sort of irony of the book is that it's a Christian man trying to do a Christian act in a dysfunctional Christian society. And it asks a lot of questions about complicity and silence and shame and all of those things. But I really don't think the duty of art is to answer those questions, is to kind of provoke them. And maybe it's kind of easier to absorb than an academic report or a government report.
I wish they were always as easy as this, because this literally fell in our lap. I was out in the New Mexican desert with Cillian, and I was sitting across from him watching what he was doing in Oppenheimer. I had already called Ben and told him what I was witnessing and how incredible it was. And a couple days later, Cillian said, "I have my next movie I really want to do." And I said, "We're starting a studio. Can we do it?" And so, as Alan said, it really came together quickly. So I think sometimes it's serendipity that kind of pulls these things together. And obviously, we do the normal thing of receiving submissions and reading them. And we've got a whole team of people who try to figure out what our slate is going to be. But this one just kind of fell from heaven for us.
And I do not break out of their line, and the other one, I just cannot stand suffering of this other person. I have to help her no matter what happens to me, basically.
Well, it's interesting. I remember I listened to a podcast that Claire Keegan did about the book, and she said that he's not a hero. He's actually a man that's undergoing some sort of breakdown. And I thought that was a much more interesting way to play it. And nothing is decided upon, nothing is, planned. It all happens by accident, and it's all this kind of collision of, this repressed grief and the stuff that's happening in his marriage and the stuff that's happening in the community. So I don't ever see him kind of as a hero. And I think the best thing about the script and about the book is that at the end, everyone has a different opinion about what happens. Is it a happy ending? Is it a sad ending? Is it what's going to happen to Sarah? What's going to happen to the family? What's going to happen to his job? And it's not necessarily, like a beautiful, triumphant ending, I think. Not necessarily, but people can decide what they want.
It's interesting about the heroism. I remember us chatting a day about how, if you were in your mid-40s in 1985, so you grew up in 50s, 60s in Ireland, and you said something really interesting, Eileen. You said men didn't have access to their emotions. Yeah. And I thought that was a very interesting key to go so great to look at men who can't cope with their emotions, and that was very helpful for me.
It's also a deeply political film, and I know both Mr. Damon and Mr. Murphy are deeply political artists, which is absolutely admirable. So in the age where
I think it's that sort of human spirit, that we kind of we don't listen to it, or we listen to it. And I think certainly what happened to him in his childhood, that act of charity or kindness or decency that happened to him in his childhood, affected him, and then the loss of his mother affected him. I also think the fact that he's surrounded by women, he may be the main character, but it's really a film about women, and so I don't know the answer, but I think it's what Alan mentioned, that listening to your own instinct, listening to what you trust to be right and wrong, not what people tell you to be right and wrong. I mean, if only we could all do that, but he does, and like I said, I don't know what the outcome for him is, or for the girl is. But I think that's ultimately what he did. But again, it wasn't a plan. It was just a sort of a mess. But he did make that gesture in the end.